Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Pure Kino podcast. I am so excited to be joined today by someone who I've been a big fan of for a long time. I'm joined by Michael Swaim. How you doing today, Michael?
Hey PK, can I call you Pure? Is that
You,
I feel like we're
uh,
close
I
enough.
I go by Kino usually, but you can call me whatever you want, sir.
I'll call you Kino then. Thanks for having me, Kino. Thrilled to be here. Very excited to chat with you.
Yeah, this podcast really is just about bringing on creators who I'm a big fan of, and just kind of exploring, their history, the work they do, and kind of what their plans are for the future. Just getting started here, I'd love to just open it up to you to just briefly kind of intro yourself. What might the audience, take away from your work?
Sure. Well, hey folks, if you do know me, you probably know me from Cracked, cracked.com, big comedy website that still runs to this day, but not really in my heart so much. But there was a golden era of about a decade where me and some of my closest pals ran the video department over at cracked.com and made some notable series like After Hours, Agents of Cracked, many others. But Agents of Cracked is the one you probably heard of or seen before if you've seen my face before. And in that time, honestly, in 13 years at Cracked, we did over like 2,000 comedy videos that I was a part of in some way or another. Touched all the scripts, performed in them, helped produce, edit, direct, the whole nine yards. And then when that sort of resolved itself about 4 years ago, at least in my life, there's still folks at Crack doing great work, but the bulk of the people I came up with all moved on, and I moved to podcasting, which has been great. I do a lot of different stuff, Kino, but yeah, I also for my day job, I moved to IGN, so sort of gaming journalism and pivoted into games, and I've been working in games for a while now. And I'm working on writing a game right now that I can't say too much about, but exciting in terms of what's going on in the future. So, but I always have two things going on at least. So, my day job was at IGN, but at the same time, I was building my podcast network, Small Beans. So, if you want to look that up, just Google the name Small Beans or check out patreon.com/smallbeans. And that's a network where me and a bunch of my cracked friends do so many podcasts. Like over a dozen different podcasts. That's our style. We like to just very eclectic. You never know what you're going to get, but you're going to get a lot of it, usually for free. And that's the goal. Yeah, I mean, and then just getting to talk to other creators like yourself. It's so fun to just be a part of the community. And yeah, build anything you want. That's my motto. Just build what you want. Start making it.
That's incredible. I know we're going to get into the story eventually here, but I think that a lot of the Cracked alumni really went on to do a lot of incredible stuff. Dan, Katie, all these different people have had really successful careers after leaving Cracked, or
Mm.
however that happened. But just to kind of start from the beginning, I'd love to learn how you even kind of got to be a part of this world, because Cracked, alongside of some of these other companies like College Humor, Funny or Die, were
Mm.
part of the kind of very early wave of like making scripted, well produced content online, and proving that it could be kind of an actual business in and of itself, not just like something as a hobby.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was is very uniquely cool to be a part of that and watch, even the people that we only cross paths with distantly, like Felicia Day and the whole Geek and Sundry crew coming up at the same time, and we'd like see each other at conventions and various events. But it was like fascinating to watch different people prove it in different ways because, of course, they were doing like nerd pop culture and narrative, and we were doing strict comedy. But it was at the time, it was that long ago. We're talking way back in the early 2000s, that we were among the first companies, as you said, proving that this can be a large scalable business model, i.e., that you can make a lot of money just doing stupid jokes in written and video format. I've got to point out that the written side pushed a lot of Crack's profits. So, like, I think we were notable for both columns. Like, we have a lot of luminaries on the written side who didn't do video as much, who also have gone on to do incredible things. Like Robert Evans comes to mind of Behind the Bastards fame, grew up alongside us at Cracked, but only writing. articles and columns. Whereas my head has always been a little in both, but mostly in the video side. And that all started back for me in, I mean, if I advanced past boring stuff like childhood interests, or I took a shine to telling jokes or whatever, I would say the first time it crystallized for me was at college. I went to UC San Diego, and they had a satire paper there, sort of like The Onion, but just about college, goings on. And I joined it just for a larf because my best pal Abe Epperson, also UCSD, like was a recruiter and talked me into it. And then at the same time, I was a theater major at UCSD and having a lot of trouble getting cast. And even when I did get cast in a big show, I didn't get the part I secretly dreamed of. And even if I did get that part, it wasn't even the show I would have picked to do. And I realized that the life of an actor, there kind of wasn't enough control for me. So I decided that I actually had ideas for what I wanted to be doing on stage. So I founded, the analog version of all this, which is an improv sketch comedy troupe with a bunch of my college pals. So I had that running. So I was learning like comedy writing chops at the newspaper, and then directing and performing chops by putting on these sketch reviews, which we called SMIC, I believe. And it stood for various things, different thing every time, SMIC. I can't remember what any of them stand for now, but uh, yeah, that was just like I think you should leave, or Kids in the Hall, like a bunch of sketches in line, and that eventually built up my courage into doing full length plays. And then my friend Abe, who I worked on the paper with, I was telling him how we had all these talented people: Katie Stoll, Katie Willard, people that crack fans will know, and it was fun and satisfying, but also fleeting in a way to just do the plays, and then they were over. And he happened to be an aspiring filmmaker. Abe has gone on to graduate, USC and DP Films and et cetera, et cetera. But uh, he really got us started in the film direction because of his interest in making short films. And then I got hooked, honestly, because, and this is a pro tip for anyone who's interested in any part of video content creation, you might not realize editing is the most fun part. More fun than acting, more fun than writing, and you don't get to edit with a play, obviously. So as soon as I edited a video and released it on YouTube, I can't. What was our very first video? Oh, an anti-drug PSA, where your dealer is so annoying to be around that my dealer is my anti-drug. There were ads. See, kids won't even be aware of this. There were ads at the time that were like, blah 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 is my anti-drug. So that was the very first thing we did. Just shot it in our college apartments, and put it out on the YouTubes. And before we knew it, Jack O'Brien, the guy who was in charge of relaunching the Cracked website, reached out and asked if we'd be interested in first submitting videos, and then over time, he basically hired all of us when we graduated, and we became the video department, which is highly unusual.
Well, I feel like this time was such a like there was no kind of set process. There was no like here's how you become a video creator. That didn't exist until YouTube came along, and not even at
Yeah.
the beginning of YouTube. Once they started finding ways to monetize all that stuff. So it's the whole traditional route of you have to be an actor, and you have to get an agent, and you have to do it this way is
Hmm.
no longer the case. I mean, you can make something yourself. You can put it online. It can go viral, and you can develop your audience that way, which is that's been very exciting for me to see that as the online space kind of develops.
Well, and you live it, right? Like, I mean, I've seen your channel. I feel like you understand. You do a microcosm of what we did every day, which is like, honestly, good thing to do. What do people want to encounter? What would I like to see? And let's see if we can consistently deliver that to the point that people notice that I'm a reliable source of a thing they like. uh, it's as simple as that. And then, of course, over the years, it's become really, really complicated. So now there's the algorithm, and there's the question about, and I'm happy to talk about whatever you want to talk about, but like when Cracked pivoted slash lost a large part of its functionality about 4 or 5 years ago, that had to do with uh, confusion slash lying around what the algorithm was saying. Like, uh, deals with larger companies and companies that run your ad revenue streams who are telling you, you got to do this because the algorithm says this because blah, blah, blah. And this was in the day where we were first even forming things. Like, it's interesting because working at IGN 12, 13 years later, it's come so far. I can go to Google Trends and prove to the guy at the next desk, pre-pandemic, I can prove to the person on Zoom, look, Bloodborne PS4 kart racer is trending slightly higher than Bloodborne walkthrough. And that's actually actionable information. And I actually think that's a great process because it's helping creators identify what their audience actually would be interested in hearing about. But back in the day, there was so much guessing in the dark and overcorrecting. I do think that's a large part of, and College Humor and Funny or Die went through similar processes. They're still around, but in highly altered forms, right? And there was this big awakening, uh, especially with a company whose initials are FB, and I won't say their name because I don't know if that would cause me legal problems. But miss or under or over representing like the various things that the algorithm is saying. And now I think we've gotten to a point where it's so advanced that everyone has their own analytics and metrics tools, right, built into their browser, uh, which has pros and cons, but it certainly means that you aren't reliant on other platforms so much other than YouTube itself. All hail Google.
That's still the king.
YouTube is king.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see because you're right. I mean, College Humor exists, in some form, but it's definitely different than the golden age that you described. Cracked is still going, but is very much different. And it's kind of been more of a trend of like going to more like individual creators, individual people, or small groups of people making content rather than the bigger corporations. And I'm wondering from your end, how has that experience been different for you to do it not solely on your own? You've got a team with you at Small Beans, but not having the same kind of resources that Crack did, but also maybe having more freedom. How has the process kind of changed for you over time?
Yeah, there's it's gotten bigger and smaller at the same time with the medium part has sort of hollowed out, which happens in a lot of creative industries over time, I think. You can sort of follow the same thing with traditional film where we don't make like the classic example Jack O'Brien would always use is we don't make Kramer versus Kramer. Kramer versus Kramer is a boring movie about a divorce that between two adults, damn it. It's very sophisticated adult take on divorce. And it won Best Picture in, the late 70s. And that is not the kind of thing that wins Best Picture anymore. It's either a tiny, tiny movie or a huge blockbuster are sort of what we make. And everything's good and bad and everything changes and stays the same. So I will say that it's I think it's great now. You truly don't really need Cracked because you don't necessarily need a destination website when you have a powerful, robust playlist tool and you can just find individual creators and add them, blah, blah, blah. Um, but I will say there is a sadness to the idea that there was this some kind of ecosystem and that's gone now. Whereas even so, like, money has found internet video content, meaning there are very serious people in suits in office buildings who really care what's on YouTube and how to monetize YouTube. And so there are some ways in which, if you want to hit the big time, you kind of now it's back to you do kind of need an agent, or you at least need to know the ropes or have a way in. Um, and yet at the same time, you objectively, from the user experience vantage, like you said, you don't need there to be like a college campus called College Humor where all the college people, where like Jake and Amir are always are. Um, and yet, I do think there's something lost insofar as Small Beans. I don't. It would be a completely different set of people because it's hard for me because I'm lost in the forest for the trees, right? But I don't know who would be my friends. Who would I talk to? Because all my friends are from crack. And I do have, that's how I know I'm like not the youngest guy around anymore, is I'm starting to have the generation gap where I'm like, how do people make friends now? Because uh, I'm heavily online and I make, friends easily online, but I still really value Daniel and Katie and Cody and Adam and Abe and all these people I met by being in a building in person at Crack for 10 years. And that did create a bond that feels like we're just picking up where we left off. Whereas I think you can achieve exactly the same thing if you're starting from let's say you're watching this and you're just starting content creation now. It's arguably still a global pandemic, and so you're even more stuck inside. And if you're listening to the sound of my voice, statistically speaking, right now you're probably not being hired by like a cracked like entity to make video. So you're in that camp where you're an individual. And I would encourage you highly to think of your career or yourself as like a puppy. You need to be socialized as well. Um, One of the greatest things, and it's a great indicator of success that I've seen any content creator do it consistently, is cross pollinate. Reach out to just realize that everyone's alone now and you have to be proactive, and your community is there. The internet is fully capable of exchanging enough information that you can feel connected to a community, but it does make it you requires more buy-in to find your community, right? You at least have to type in something you're interested about, make some posts, friend some people, take that big step and go like, would you ever want to like chat or come on my podcast or whatever? And I've done that a few times with creators I love, like which is funny because this is also an artifact of the times. Web comics, like newspaper comic strips, but on the internet, they had a very. I know that there's some ever anymore, like XKCD or what have you, but remember there was an era for those too that's gone now, and I would reach out to like webcomics creators I really admired and try to get them on crack stuff, and it worked out a couple times. So reach out, talk to people, try to collaborate on projects, because not only is it good for business because you find each other's audiences, but also I really think you have to meet 10 people for you to meet one person that you really, really vibe with and get and become close friends with. And you need close friends. That's all. End of that rant. Yeah.
No, that makes perfect sense, and I think that that is, you know, one of the reasons why I think like College Humor, Cracked, all these sites are not maybe doing as well. They're still putting out content. I still think the content is good in its own way, but
Hmm.
you've lost that sense of the people, the community that Cracked had, which was the people on camera. The after hours crew, the escort mission, you and Greg.
Right.
Just seeing those faces, I sense that camaraderie between you all, and of course it's acting, but it feels like almost like you're hanging out with your friends when you're watching an old classic Cracked video. Just hanging around the diner talking about whatever. And I think that that is something that I kind of mourn the loss of. As people find success on their own individually, and they can make great stuff, but you're not going to have as frequently the kind of cross collaboration that you had in these kind of centralized locations.
Right. And forget about stuff like, I mean, you asked about, about a few of the differences. One concrete difference is I was better resourced. Small Beans, we've been really lucky. We have great patrons and they pay enough to keep the lights on and produce all our podcasts and pay our hosts and all this stuff. And that's wonderful. But Cracked once gave me $100,000 to shoot a 5 episode miniseries about that's like a Star Trek parody on a real space set with like effects makeup, or like we did a Scooby-Doo sketch where we all looked perfectly like live action Scooby-Doo characters. So uh at the beginning of Small Beans, in fact, if you hear this and you happen to get interested and search out Small Beans, I highly recommend you dig back into the early stuff, because on our YouTube channel, right when we left Cracked, we were like, well, we do video, and video is still my heart. Uh, and so we were, with patronage, putting that money back into filming. And I found something out that Cracked found out, which is part of the reason they closed their video department, is that it's getting harder and harder. Uh, and whatever you think about the politics or business of it, it's just a fact. More of the money goes directly to YouTube or Google now than it did before, and there's less of like a free for all of ad revenue, and companies have to be a lot more careful. So we did some great series like Disney Owns You, Life Hacks, Family Meeting, we even for a while did an off-brand after hours called Off Hours, uh, And it was really great because I felt like I proved we knew what we were doing. We could do it if we wanted to, but it was not possible to keep we were operating at a financial loss to such a degree that we gave up, and now we're just audio podcasts. And so that's the big thing I miss. Obviously, is to like get to make. I could still go out today and get my friends together and make a video, and maybe I will, but see if I don't. But I can't make like a high budget parody of Looper with guys who rappel down the ceiling and like gunplay and stuff. And there are some YouTubers who do achieve that um, a few times a year by scrimping and saving and being an amazing effects wizard. Or there's, of course, the occasional YouTube star who has broken through and has managements and reps and is rich and does high budget stuff. I'm not that guy. For a brief period, I worked at a company that had a budget. Um, and now I am a sole proprietor and I don't have a budget. And that makes me sad. I would still love to do videos. I do still write sketches and like post just the scripts. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of sad. And I've put that energy into, so like I said, instead of being medium where I actually got paid to make medium budget videos, I'm now small and big, small and big. So on the small side, I just make podcasts, which is low lift. You're just talking. Obviously everyone understands the benefit of podcasting technology, but then on the big side, I'm only writing basically feature length screenplays and TV pilots. So basically, for me, my life was, I've always wanted to make movies. And my life for a long time was, well, I'm not making movies, but I am making thousands of these comedy videos. And some of them look like real movies, quote unquote, or have really good effects. And I've worked with some amazing professionals. Uh, and now my life is, well, I can't afford to make any videos, really, but it's either make it or break it, man. It's like next time you see my name on a video, it'll probably be a movie or nothing. My tombstone.
Well, you actually did. Well, you were part of the team that made a movie, right? Kill Me Now.
Yes, but it's been 10 years, so I'm overdue for another one, I think.
Yes, but I'd love to ask more about that process. Like, how did you guys go about making that? Was that like where did the funding come from? How did that movie come about?
Yeah, so that's it's in my dream is still to make a movie because I'm very hard on myself and I don't count Kill Me Now, even though I'm quite proud of it. It was an incredible once in a lifetime experience. I wrote, acted in it, and co-produced it and edited it. So it's funny that I still don't count it because I didn't direct it. And it's not, here's the thing. I mentioned Abe Epperson. He's my creative partner, and we are like a creative team attached at the hip. He directed every single and shot every single episode of Agents of Crack. He defined what After Hours looks like, and then other people, just copied his. But like, he for a long time. Another great director, Adam Ganzer, came on and ended up balancing out the team when there were just too many videos to do. But Abe Epperson rather defined the cracked look, the cracked style, and made the bulk of those videos behind the camera. So to me, when I say me, I mean me and Abe. And when me and Abe co-write a movie and co-direct it, then I can die happy. Then I will have made a movie. And I just want to prove that I can because I think I could make a really funny movie. But I kind of already did because way back when in 2009 or something like that, uh, we were approached by uh, Gareth West was his name, and he is a British film financier. He produced Machete, is my understanding, and a couple of other things. A UK show called EastEnders, so traditional film producer, and he liked this particular director, Travis Long, and who's a music video director at the time, and he liked us as writers from Cracked. So he just reached out and was very frank and was like, I asked these other people first. They said no, some other sketch troupe that was notable at the time. And they were like, and the director's already attached, so you don't have control over that. but do you have any screenplays? And because Abe and I have never wanted anything more than to be filmmakers, we had several screenplays lying around, and we sent them. And the one they responded to was called Kill Me Now, which is a medium budget horror comedy set in the woods, like a slasher. Well, low budget by today's standards, but when I say medium budget, I mean it was a lot of money for us at the time, and especially considering. So there's a lot of things in that movie that were dumb to do that I can't believe we pulled off that I'm really proud of. So they don't. You can look at it and go, "Well, that doesn't look good," and I'm like, "Yeah, because there wasn't enough money." But that we even tried. So most people nowadays, when they make a low budget film or their debut film, right, you do some premise where it's like, someone meets their twin in a weird house, and you're like, now you only need a house and one actor who plays two parts. Great. And that's smart. What we did was dumb. We made a thing with 15 speaking characters who all appear on camera at once. They party, they get drunk, they wander around the woods, they get killed. There's a bear that you see, a van crashes through the wall of a building, and we had to achieve all these things. And uh, it was just a great community experience. Speaking of getting to do stuff in the real world, because we basically just called up all of our cohort and even people we hadn't met before but were just fans of, and sent them the script, attached who we could. Flew out to Effingham, Illinois, in the middle of nowhere, a town where we basically had run of the town because they were we were in the newspaper because they were so excited that a movie was being filmed there. And did it, and did it in a way that any YouTube creator would recognize, because we had actors building sets. There was no proper paperwork around what we had. A sound designer, I'm sorry to say, work a 60-hour shift, which they volunteered to do, but because they were shooting scenes and then the actors would go to sleep and the other actors would wake up and we're still behind, so you got to keep shooting. And stuff that is illegal. And now that I'm in my 30s, I would never do it because it would be exploitative of me. But since we were all 19, it's like, well, we all agree to do this, right? We're all young, we can handle it. So we just stayed up all night, powered through, blah, blah, blah. Very low budget, around 100K. And we would go to the only store in town that was open 24 hours, which was a giant Walmart, and we were like writing scenes the night before, buying all the props and costume pieces at the Walmart, rushing them to set, getting people dressed and shooting. And you can see the whole movie for free on YouTube. Kill Me Now. It features some folks who went on to Saturday Night Live, Kyle Mooney and Beck Bennett. Also, Brett Fancy, who, if you're in the UK, you probably know because he was big on that show, EastEnders. But very proud of it. I still think it comes across really funny for how low budget it is. But yeah, I don't, but it doesn't count. It doesn't count until Abe and I co-direct a movie.
I gotcha. I
Yeah.
got you. No, that's a great story because I'm like you in the sense that like lately it's been like consuming my thoughts that I really want to produce something like original of my own.
Mm,
When you're doing stuff, whether it's like comedy videos for you, or in my case it's more like edited reviews, it's like, yeah, but I want to do something that's like bigger, that's like something that I can call my own. And I'm struggling with the same problems you described, which is like it's so prohibitively expensive to film even something simple. Like I filmed a little bit for a review actually, but it
mhm.
costs like $500 for literally, it's like 10 minutes worth of footage. But to
Right.
go to the thing, to pay the gas, to get the props, it all just like it adds up. And I'm like, yeah, I want to make something I can be really proud of.
Yeah, it really truly does, especially if you have good taste. So you'll look at the frame and you go, "Oh wait, I think the lighting should be good too." And you're like, "Sucker, now you got to buy." Are you aware of 3-point lighting? Because you got to buy a background light, you need a fill light, and you need a rim light, and you got to learn about this. But I will say it's a phenomenal, amazing process. I love learning about film and filmmaking, and it is highly rewarding. But it is without a doubt not the cheapest endeavor that you can do to get at art. Like uh, several of the Cracked alums have gone on to make their living mostly through the writing of novels. And that is a great art form because no one has to give you any money or even tell you. You don't even need anyone's permission. No one has to go like, you're allowed. Whereas to make a movie, you need at least 12 people who are like, I agree to show up at at the time, at the day, and do what you tell me to in front of the camera. And that can be tricky, you know, unless you have company dollars behind you. So I do even more so admire creators today who like the, you know, Legend of Vox Machina people, or but they start as a D&D thing, which is relatable and easy to produce, and then it grows, right? So it's baby steps, but I really admire your ambitions, because I agree that I've done both and I continue to do both. A lot of our podcasts are pop culture analysis, and a lot of my work at, well, even more so at IGN, because they're sort of video game analysis, right? They don't make video games. They don't make, well, I won't say they don't make anything, but you know exactly what I mean. They don't do the thing itself. They talk about it. And I love talking about movies and video games. And if you want to hear me do that, listen to One Upsmanship, our brand new video games podcast. Um, but there is something special about making something where you feel like it's, of course, everything's derivative of things because ideas come from somewhere, but it feels like you're starting from scratch and you're figuring out who you are, what you want to say. So really good luck with that.
Thank you so much. And there's this little bit of, when you make your living critiquing stuff, there's this
Mhm.
voice in the back of your head that's like, well, show me what you can do, tough guy. Like, you're going to
Yeah.
talk shit about this movie. You're going to make fun of this thing. It's like, can you do better? And, it's almost like trying to prove to yourself that, like, I know what I make is probably going to turn out badly in some way, but at least I want to try.
Well, then and you're willing to take the risk and learn that about yourself, right? Because maybe it will turn out badly because you didn't have enough money for the effect. That's no shade, right? You learned something, you tried, blah blah blah. Who cares? But what you fear is that it'll turn out badly because you'd be like, oh, it was just a bad idea, or it's just boring. Dang. So you got to find out. It's like Luke venturing into the cave to fight Vader. Like, I think for someone who talks a lot of smack about pop culture, to finally get into the trenches and make some story is important, whether that's through a film, comic, writing, whatever.
Well, the thing about Crack 2 that, or the different series that you did on there was, it wasn't just reviews in and of itself. Like that was a big part of it, is like talking about the thing. But even in stuff like After Hours, or my personal favorite of the series you did, which was Escort Mission,
Hmm.
there was like a little narrative in and of the video of itself that flowed through it. Like, yeah, they were talking about video games and making jokes about it, but there would be like the storylines that were going on in the apartment of like just being roommates and having that little interaction. And I really liked that element of it. It was like, again, the difference between, I think, just being a reviewer and being a character within a movie
Hmm.
that just happens to be about reviewing a video game or a TV show or whatever. But I'd love
Right.
to hear your kind of thoughts about how you guys went about doing that.
Yeah, I do think that was a fairly unmessed with formula at the time, which is still kind of mind blowing to me because it is so ubiquitous now. And I do feel like I was swept up in that history, or was somehow part of that, which is very fascinating. But I would put all credit toward Jason Pargin and Jack O'Brien, and different people for different aspects. I give myself some credit for the video voice for sure, but Jack and Jason, because Cracked grew out of this forums called Pointless Waste of Time forums that slowly evolved into articles where they took pop culture, and this sounds so common now, or everyone who hears this will go, you mean the internet? But there was a time where this was very unique. They took pop culture and thought about it very to the top of your intelligence, and picked apart, like, but if Spider-Man works this way, why would Doc Ock from his own point of view do this? Isn't that crazy? The kind of stuff they do. On our big touch point was Clerks. We would always talk about Clerks, and like, yeah, it wants to be like, and that was like one of the few things like that where they're like, they just talk like your friends. They're just talking about the movie, and how it's sad that all the stormtroopers died on the Death Star, right, etc. So uh, it's very much that Clerks vibe. And then what's funny for the video side is you talked about sensing that underlying desire for story and narrative structure. I think that you get that, by taking all of us, all these UCSD people I mentioned, and at the time we were a troop called Those Aren't Muskets, and forcing us to do the cracked thing. And that's almost, there almost was a tension there, because I will say this. No, Abe is like USC is a very prestigious film school. He didn't graduate that thinking, I want to shoot a series where it's just people seated at a diner and there's one shot this way and one shot this way. But, and of course, the stuff he shot at Cracked ranges. So some of it was very sophisticated. I'm thinking of a video Abe directed called The Insane World of Video Game Healthcare. That's a giant oneer all through a hospital with a bunch of moving parts and video game characters and effects and blah, blah, blah. But my point being, there was actually a good tension there, because Jack and Jason would come in and tell us what the algorithm said, and we would want to make and everyone that we added, like Cody came in a couple years in, but like everyone we added had a very strong narrative bent and wanted to make movies and TV. So we were always saying, well, okay, I want to do a thing like my favorite series I did there, probably, I said, I really want to do this thing where I'm Harry Potter. It's hard to explain. I'm Harry Potter, but he has the voice of Hunter S. Thompson, and he's like a drugged out burnout, like shitty character, like It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, but it's Harry Potter, he can do magic. And they were like, so Jason and Jack would be able to look at the computer printout and sigh and go, no, 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 do something about Back to the Future or Batman, please. And then we would end up with After Hours, which is people sitting around a diner, or Escort Mission, as you mentioned, where it's Greg and I, and we're talking about romance mechanics, for example, in video games. And in the writer's room, all we're trying to do is beat each other's jokes and be as funny as possible. But what was unique about Cracked at the time was there was actual information in it. Like, you would actually, I mean, we did a series, Escort Mission was how we covered video games. After Hours primarily covered film, but the Cracked signature was that combo. So I remember a show called Today's Topic where we would just cover anything we wanted, and we covered questions as serious and interesting as, like, is there such a thing as free will, or is free will as an illusion and everything's predetermined? And what do real philosophers who are, notable, what are their actual thoughts around this? So it's educational with jokes, and that was the magic sauce. And then chasing the pop cultural things that we found that people were most interested in at the time. And you get that underlying current of like, there's a bit of a story here, or every once in a while these weird series bubble up that are like a real show. That was because everyone working there wanted to be making like half-hour TV sitcoms. Um, and it's funny because that's almost lost over the course of my lifetime. The reason we wanted to do that is it felt real. Like, oh, so and so got to make a real TV show. We'll never get respect or whatever. Now everything is on streaming. Like, Prey wasn't in theaters. That's crazy to me. So, um, so now I'm just as proud of it as, like, I'm like, we did make a show. We made a show that ran for 10 years. It's called After Hours. It was a very popular show, watched by many people. But at the same time, while we were working there, we were always looking at, like, It's Always Sunny or Workaholics and being like, oh, I want to be the Workaholics guys.
And this is gonna sound like I'm trying to kiss your ass, but I promise you I'm not.
Bring it
For
on.
the generation like me who came up like just exclusively watching internet, like yeah, watching TV and stuff too, but the primary thing was internet culture. People like you are celebrities to us. This is like
Oh, wow.
I looked up to people who are making content, and that's why I wanted to like eventually start my own channel,
Yeah.
because I was like, this is so fucking cool what they're doing here. Like again, just like Clerks, right? Or Tarantino, having that kind
Mm-hmm.
of like voice that touches on the stuff that's going on, internet culture, pop culture, all that kind of stuff was so unique and so like kind of mind blowing for me. So again, I think I get why in your mind it's like, it's not real, in the same way that I think like what we're doing right now, people might look up to that one day and be like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
was the coolest thing ever. But I think for a lot of people, I think they really look up to, again, Cracked, College Humor, all these sites for being like, oh, I didn't even know like people could do something like this, but it's fantastic.
Oh, thank you so much. Also, fun fact, we shot After Hours at like 3 or 4 different diners, but the second place we shot it was at the very table where the opening scene of Reservoir Dogs takes place, where they're
Really?
arguing about whether to give a tip or not. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's
So the
awesome.
After Hours, yeah, a couple After Hours episodes, we're literally sitting at the Reservoir Dogs table, but they remodeled it, the whole restaurant, so you wouldn't notice. But yeah,
No, that's so cool. Yeah,
blessed.
like I said, and another, I wanted to bring it back to another like lesser known series that you guys did, which
Hmm.
was the Startup, which was you, Katie, and Cody,
Cody Johnston, yeah.
all on Skype,
Hmm.
like talking with each other, and there's this like the wordplay and stuff, and like the timing and the back and forth nature was again something like It's Always Sunny or Arrested Development, where it's like just beat by beat was so freaking funny and so entertaining that that again that's still one of my favorite series that you guys did.
Thank you. I do. I encourage people to look that up. So when Small Beans started, we did a bunch of sound alike series because we're like, well, we invented these series. We have a right to keep doing them. And that one was called Family Meeting. If you want to see Katie, Cody, and I do a few bonus ones. But um, yeah, so see my previous comment about editing. I'm so glad that that came through because at Cracked, you very much had to you know, the crack comedy writers were very sharp, and many have gone on to write for TV and win Emmys and things. And uh, it was a brutal writing environment. I mean, meaning like jokes had to be really good to get through and would get cut easily. And every show had to have an underlying conception of like, what is the value this show brings mechanically to the website? Why now? And for the startup, and I think startup is really deceptive because you can watch it and go, they just tried to do the lowest budget show possible by just sitting around, blah, blah, blah. We actually thought, what would as a challenge, what would it be to reduce the concept of sketch comedy delivery to a Zoom call? Well, your main handle, all you have is editing. And what is editing? Timing. And what's the most important aspect of comedy? Timing. So you still really have a lot of control. And Abe and I had long ago discovered in our sketch work that one of the funniest editing tricks you can do is have someone say a long word and go from like, if you know what I mean, they're on the phone voice, like a filtered voice to their real voice, or vice versa. You cut in or out of a phone call in between words. And so and then we were also inspired by a great show called Peep Show, if people haven't seen that. But they really blew my mind. It's a British sitcom that's all shot point of view. And it made me realize what's so brilliant about that is you're having talented comedic actors deliver their jokes directly to your eyes. That is very funny, or like it's powerful for them to deliver it to you. So taking all that, putting it together, and we did this stupid underlying thing about because the After Hours characters each represent. But there is a lot of comedy math behind it, is my point. So we have this quadrant of like nice, mean, dumb, smart. And the After Hours people map to that. You're like nice and smart, or you're nice and mean, or you're dumb and smart, or yeah, dumb and mean, or dumb and nice. And so the id ego and the super ego, the Freudian model of the brain, is the underlying ego for the startup, which I think you can map if you go back and watch it again. And the to me the real magic about that is that you've taken away cost for the most part. They're unremarkable, right? You've eliminated costume sets, blah blah blah. And instead of thinking of these things as, oh, that's sad, you don't have those things, I was like, no, no, no. It's like distilling it to the finest essence of Cody Johnston, or Katie Stoll, a talented comedy person, is going to say a joke just for you, right at your face, as if you are in a meeting with them, and yet it's still going to tell a story. And hybridizing that has been done repeatedly since then, but I'm super proud of it and really glad it got across. So thank you.
No, and you were saying earlier that editing is the best part of making videos, making content.
Yeah,
It
for me.
seems it seems to me too because that I think is when like the magic actually happens. That's when you start
Yes.
to actually have a finalized product. Before then, like yeah, you'll have fun filming, you joke around, but you kind of have no idea at that point whether what you've made is good or not. Like it's good on
Mhm.
paper, but is that when it comes through on the screen? And um I think that's true for writing as well. Like I don't know about you, but when I'm writing something, the first draft is the most horrible process ever because I'm like, this sucks. You don't know how to write. You're garbage. Everything you've done up until this point has been a fluke. And then once you've set it aside for a little while, you come back to it. Then you're like, oh, okay, no way. I see what's good here. And I just need to kind of like, you know, condense it or put it together in the right way. And I think editing's the same way for video.
And I like to think of it as feeling your own growth, because if I read something that I wrote 15 years ago, like high school love poetry, and I go, "That's bad," and I know why it's bad, and I know how to I could rewrite the same thing and make it better. That means I'm a better writer than this shithead was 15 years ago who wrote this. So, yeah, editing in both senses. I meant editing footage, but I completely agree. Editing script is also more fun than writing the script initially. And it goes funny in comedy. And I find that in drama, it also goes impactful, not impactful, impactful. But for comedy, it goes, it's really funny when you have the idea. Wouldn't it be funny if his butt was a duck? And you and all your friends are like, that's so hilarious, dude. And then you're sitting there writing like, so and so enters, his butt is a duck. And you're like, that's not that funny to read. And then you rehearse it 15 times and you audition people. When we were doing it for real, you audition people so you like 1,000 people go, his butt's a duck, his butt is a duck. And by the time you're on set, you're like, look, just say the butt duck thing. We got to get out of here. Then it's not until you're sitting in the editing bay and you edit it together and you add the effect and it goes wham, wham, wham. And you're like, we were right. It is funny that the guy's butt is a duck." So, yeah, there's a whole circle of life that happens. And I also think there's like a 2-year rule where I couldn't tell you the second we upload a sketch, I couldn't tell you if it was good or not. 2 years later, I can watch it and be like, that one was not very good, or that was one of our best sketches. It becomes clear afterwards. It takes time because you have to sort of become an even better writer before you can judge your own writing. So you have to keep growing always.
Yeah. I'm curious if there's an example. I don't know if you remember any that you were like, "Oh, we did something here and it didn't turn out the way we wanted it to, or it wasn't as funny as we wanted, or something." If there's anything at crack that maybe fit that description.
Yeah, no, everything was perfect. No, there are a few. There's sort of multiple categories, right? Like another way in which we feel our own growth is, in my opinion, if you disagree, I strongly disagree, but I think it's good that we're broadening our definitions of gender fluidity and embracing various identities, and everything down to like how we name each other, how we call each other, respecting each other's like however you feel your whatever is your core identity. So in that regard, like most comedians, and I thought I was, because I've always felt I was trying hard to be nice, or I've always wanted to be a good person or a chill guy. But there's definitely sketches, old enough sketches that I look back on that I'm like, oh, that was in poor taste. Or like that was ableist and I wasn't aware of ableism at the point. Like, I wouldn't have done something aggressively racist or like I wasn't that dumb, but I didn't understand the nuances of gender identity, or I made some joke at the expense of an impacted group of people. And that never feels good. Luckily, they're few and far between, but I can think of one or two. But if you're asking for one that just didn't, then the other bucket, of course, is one where you're like, that was just all right. That just didn't sing to me. Um, I would say probably, well, it's funny because I'm encouraging people. I'm hoping new listeners will look up the really good ones that get them addicted to our content. But yeah, there are some. I won't name drop any after hours in particular because it's hard to recall. They all sort of blur together eventually. But there's some today's topics for sure where I'm like, in my opinion, this isn't funny enough. It became too much of just an information dump about blah. But again, that's taste. There are some people who would go like, I know this is a JSON script because it's just information. Dry information, just the way I like it. So it's whatever you like. But yeah, I was always the voice in the room saying this should just be as funny as possible. And Jack O'Brien and I fought a lot because Jack was the voice in the room saying, don't forget, it should have actual interesting factoids. His motto was comedy with a college education, or uh, we want to make the reader the most interesting person at the next party they go to. So you want to arm them with fun facts that actually make them go, "That's true. I didn't know that. That's really interesting." But I would go like, I don't care about that. There just needs to be a joke every 2 sentences that really makes me laugh. And with our powers combined, that's a really good, if you can pull off both, that's when it really works. But they do drag each other down sometimes. So like we would have the occasional episode that's like dry, I would say.
No, that makes total sense. And I think that is, Crack's brand really was blending those two ideas of
Mhm.
being incredibly funny and very witty. I think that's what set it aside from some of these other networks that maybe were just focused on comedy. I think Cracked kind of stood out in the sense, I think, again, shows like After Hours really appealed to that
Mhm.
idea, which was, really analyzing things. And you're right when you said earlier that like that idea now is so common that it almost feels cliche, even of itself. But it was things like this that actually made it so that like everyone nowadays is over analyzing pop culture and
Right.
talking about it and doing this kind of stuff.
And we
But
had, like I said, we had inspiration. So there's people that came before us, like even Shane Black also comes to mind as someone who was making refreshing, like they mention. But it's interesting, younger people, I don't think will organically remember. There was a time where on TV and movies, they would never mention other movies or TV or other pop culture. It was like a fantasy, it was like a rule there where there's like, oh, every universe on TV is separate for some reason. And so it's just it's very fascinating to see it change to the complete opposite, where Doctor Strange is like, bumping fists with Spider-Man and then turning and high-fiving the other Spider-Man from the other franchise owned by a different studio. And it's like, wow, we really broke down all barriers. And some cool stuff has come out of it. I actually like that Spider-Man No Way Home movie.
yeah, it's so in the completely opposite direction, and I wonder when we're going to reach the point where we're like, can we go back to everything is in and of its own world again, and we can
It
not
will. It
have to
will go back and
have to
forth, I
memorize
bet.
every single thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I know we're running close to our hour here, but I'd love to maybe just hear from you about like, what does the future look like for, what you're going to be working on, what the projects you're going to be doing, small beans, which I'm going to link in the description of this video, but like, what can we expect moving forward from you, and give us
Yeah.
a spotlight on that.
Well, like I said, I still have this weird chip on my shoulder where I don't feel like I've really made it yet, and I'll never rest because of that. So I'm doing so much stuff. So I'm really glad you asked. Um, the easiest way to stay on top of it all, if you're interested by this conversation, I've been privileged to have, I'd say follow me on Twitter at Swaim_corp, or hit up Small Beans wherever you find podcasts, and/or at patreon.com/smallbeans.
Oh my god, that sounds so exciting! I cannot wait to see more content from you guys because, like I said, I've enjoyed your work for the past 10 years of all the stuff you put out there. It's been fantastic. Thank you so much for joining me on this podcast. Like I said, not trying to kiss your ass at all, but you are one of the celebrities who I really wanted to meet, and it's like you said, really cool that I got to just ask, and you found the time to do this. That is awesome. Thank you guys so much for watching. And stay tuned for the next episode of the Pure Kino podcast coming. I don't know when. Talk to you guys then.